There is a particular cruelty in being wronged procedurally. No raised voice, no smoking gun. Just a board different than yesterday, and someone above you in the relief order who started later and whose name sits where yours was, and the explanation, offered casually, almost bored, that the adjustment was made for efficiency. No shit given that you have other responsibilities, a life outside of work. You are just treated like a pawn on a chessboard being moved around until you're eliminated. You're not imagining this. That's the first thing to say. And it needs saying plainly because the entire architecture of the system depends on making you doubt your own perception. Gaslighting in medicine is not a dramatic phenomenon. It doesn't announce itself. It operates through repetition and procedural language, and the quiet, devastating leverage of it all evens out. It operates through the weaponization of your own professionalism against you, because you were taught somewhere between your second and third year of residency that the good ones don't complain, that absorbing is a virtue, that the friction you're experiencing is formative rather than extractive. Residents understand this more viscerally than anyone else in the hierarchy. And it's worth saying that plainly too, because most writing on physician mistreatment speaks in the anodyne language of junior physicians and early career attendings, as though the training years themselves aren't a kind of sustained violence dressed up as education. What happens to a resident is philosophically distinct from what happens to a junior attending, though they do exist on the same continuum. The resident has no exit. There is no market leverage, no ability to interview elsewhere during a contract period, no real recourse that doesn't involve the very people who evaluate you. You are structurally captive. And into that captivity, a system pours the logic that your suffering is pedagogical, that the 2 a.m. ruptured appendix, the impossible social discharge, the trauma rolling in at the shift's end is teaching you something, shaping you into a physician, giving you some grit, that you will look back on this and be grateful somehow. Some of them do look back and feel gratitude somehow. This is worth examining rather than celebrating. Gratitude for having survived something is not evidence that the thing was necessary. People are grateful to have survived car accidents. We do not structure medical education around car accidents. What residents are actually being taught, and this is the uncomfortable structural truth beneath all the talk of grit and resilience, is their place. They are being taught which suffering is speakable and which is not. They are being taught that pattern recognition applied to their own conditions is insubordination. They are being taught that the word difficult can end a career, so they swallow the difficulty and locate it inside themselves as a personal failing, as insufficient toughness. Meanwhile, the senior attending leaves on time again. The protected research block remains untouched. The holiday request from the third-year fellow submitted in August disappears from the spreadsheet by October, and no one remembers who edited it. Transparency without audit is theater. It is a precise description of what passes for fairness in most training programs. The policies exist. The language of equity exists. The meetings where everyone agrees that calls should be distributed fairly, that complexity should rotate, that no one person should absorb disproportionate burden. These actually do happen. And then the board changes overnight. One person makes some decision, and that person who changes against it is told they are focusing on the negative. The data is not negative. The data is the data. Here's what compounds the injury. Most of the people perpetuating this have forgotten that they are doing it. Systems drift towards comfort for those with leverage, and the drift is slow enough that it doesn't feel like a decision. Senior partners did not wake up and choose to insulate themselves. They simply stopped noticing the insulation, because insulation is invisible from the inside. This does not make them innocent. Unconscious extraction is still extraction, but it does mean that demanding individual accountability often misses the structural point, which is the absence of auditability is itself a policy choice. And it is a choice that always benefits the same people. If relief order isn't logged, it evens out is not a policy. It is a story told to people who cannot afford to stop believing it. The residents who leave, and they leave in numbers that should alarm anyone paying attention, are not leaving because they lack grit. Grit is actually what got them here, what kept them here, what makes them useful enough to exploit them. They are leaving because they finally stopped performing the cognitive labor of convincing themselves that the asymmetry was temporary. Temporary is a story that has to be actively maintained. At some point, the maintenance cost exceeds the return, and a person looks at the math clearly and simply stops believing. Leadership responds to this attrition with confusion that would be almost touching if it weren't so costly. The new generation, they say, doesn't understand sacrifice. What they mean is the new generation has developed an uncomfortable fluency in identifying extractive, abusive systems and won't do the courtesy of pretending otherwise. Seniority can mean something. Experience is real. Junior attendings want to hear about it. Hierarchy in a clinical environment can reflect genuine competence gradients that matter for patient safety. None of that is in dispute. What is in dispute is whether seniority should be invisible and uncodified, operative everywhere and stated nowhere, bending always towards those who already hold it. If the hierarchy is legitimate, it can bear examination. If it cannot bear examination, if asking for metrics feels like insubordination, if requesting documentation of case distribution is received as an attitude problem, then what you're looking at is not a meritocracy with a seniority track. You're looking at an abusive power structure protecting itself through the manufactured docility of people who are too indebted, too watched, and too afraid to say what they came to see. You're not overthinking it. The schedule changed. You noticed. You were told you were being sensitive. These are three separate facts, and only one of them is in question, and it is not the first two. The system is teaching you your place. It has been teaching you your place since intern year, through call structure and case assignment, and the particular way your attendings respond when you try to leave on time to take care of yourself. The lesson is delivered without malice, usually, which is somehow the worst part, because malice can be confronted, named, taken to a committee. They talk behind your back. This cannot be taken to a committee. This is the committee. This is the culture inside which the committee operates. This is the water. The question, the only one that matters, finally, is not whether you're imagining the pattern. The question is what you're willing to do with the clarity of having seen it.